Hello, Mr. Francis. How are you today?
I'm good, Mr. Martin. How are you? I
I'm
feel
doing
like
just
we should
fine.
have like this somber intro music.
Yeah, only for
Maybe the
the
last couple episodes will
impending
have.
couple
Yeah,
episodes. We'll have some sort of intro music. I know I can make that happen. There's a
I think you
restream thing there.
can.
You can
I
add
think
some
you
files,
can.
some background noise. All kinds of stuff can be done.
Background noise.
I imagine that the Francis house has been thoroughly de-turkeyed on the outside, and there has been the arrival of some large inflatable of non-turkey content. Is that what you're about, or are you just
Well,
skipping that whole shift?
no, we have we the Christmas inflatables went up. Although interesting enough, somebody after Thursday unplugged my turkeys for me, which was interesting. Um, I guess they were tired of my anti-Christmas display. So Santa Claus has now stood up. Although this morning when I looked and I haven't fixed him, he had blown down with the wind last night. So I've got to work on that. And let's see. We have three inflatables currently, and I have one I bought. I've got to find, which is of the is Elf, Buddy from Elf. But one of them is Santa Claus, who's I think 10 feet tall, 9 feet tall. He's a pretty tall Santa Claus. One of them is a snowman in a coffee cup, which head turns, and it says on the front of it, "Cup of snow." It's pretty
Oh,
witty. Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
Liddy.
cup of
Yeah,
snow.
okay.
And the other one is well, it's Baby Yoda with a stocking. I mean, I know
Yeah.
his name's Grogu, but nobody knows him by Grogu. It's Baby Yoda,
Baby
and
Yoda.
yep, Baby Yoda's Peyton's favorite, so we got Baby Yoda a couple of years
Yeah,
now.
we have our traditional, twinkle lights out, the icicles around the perimeter of the home,
Yeah.
and I am on the active hunt for last year's Wonderland Target brand light up llama. But I have not found a reasonably priced
Oh man, if I got to
piece
light
of
up
that llama.
llama, Devin, my bonus child's favorite things is llama. We buy everything llama. I would have,
It,
if I'd have known there's a llama out there, I don't know that reasonably priced would deter me. Like I think that I'd
yeah,
have
I've
to.
seen one or two priced over $100 for it,
Yeah, no,
and
gonna
that
go do
exceeds
that. Yeah,
my reasonably
yeah.
priced zone.
Why didn't we know
I
about this last year? That's the question.
Well, last year they were all sold out. Like I didn't know about it until everyone had already converged on Target and taken away all of them. So uh, all year long, I have been
Are
trolling
they
the
are they going to
eBay's.
bring that back out, or is that just done
I think it's
for?
one of those things they do one a year. Just what? That's something else
Man,
this year.
that's awful.
I
I
know.
need the inflatable llama. I let
It's
Devin
not even
down. That's
inflatable.
terrible.
It's not an inflatable. It's like a 3 foot tall llama
Like
with
a
lights inside, and the exterior is
like plastic.
mylar-ish,
Really,
shiny. Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Well, so
So,
on Sunday, we did the tree. Like the tree goes up, which is
oh
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I hate the tree. I do. It's a
tree
lot
goes
of
up on
work, and
Friday for us.
I end up. Well, we would have, but we had people. Sunday was the first time we could, and Devin was home. Devin has ornaments on our tree too, so Devin was in New York with her family and then came home Sunday. So, 10-foot tree and that ends up fluffing all the branches out. And that frustrates me. But 3 boxes and ornament. I think I pulled down 12 boxes. For those people who don't think we like Christmas, we have one box of Thanksgiving decorations. And I think probably three inflatables for Thanksgiving. We have four inflatables for Christmas and 12 boxes of Christmas decorations.
Yeah, I
So
don't know how many Christmas boxes we have, but it's
I married a
substantial.
teacher, dude. We have a
The
box of Christmas clothes just for my wife in school. I mean,
we
that's how that
could.
works.
We don't have a lot of stuff in the attic, but probably half of it, eh, a little less than half, are Christmas boxes of stuff. Plus, we had to make sure we erected Mount Moosemore has been put up in the kitchen. And so we've got a collection of moose that comes from my childhood that my mom collected after I was little,
So I
and they
have a
get
stuffed
arranged by
moose.
family.
I have a stuffed moose that wears a plaid jacket and a tan vest that's on our couch with the pillows. Because growing up, my favorite Christmas song that was on a vinyl album I cannot find was Morris the Moose.
Oh yeah.
Morris the
And
Moose was my jam as like a 6-year-old dude. I loved Morris the Moose.
the alpha moose, the first moose into our collection of moose is Morris the Moose.
So we bought this from Hobby Lobby a couple years ago, and I named him Morris. And the kids think I'm nuts. They're like, "What's that
No,
about?
you're not nuts.
Why does Dad have a stuffed animal?" I'm like, "This is my childhood right here." And I have looked for Morris. Listen, if anybody has Morris the Moose on vinyl, you will forever be my friend.
I suspect that that is the genesis for this brand of moose that we actually have a ton of, which are these ones with like weighted feet. There's 4 weighted feet on them, and they kind of
Yeah.
flop around. They're kind of in the Beanie Baby style basket, but then they've got bigger ones too.
So we have,
Anyway,
like, by the way, 3 ceramic trees because, like, her mom made them, my dad made them. We got trees every. But let me say this: this is the coolest thing for us, for our family. For years, we have taken our kids every year to Hallmark. They get one ornament a year, and so Jillian has a series. She gets the same ornament from the series every year. Peyton gets the football players, obviously. Jamie's princesses, I think, and Duane and I have a couple. But then when our kids, hopefully, if they ever move out, they take their ornaments with them. That's the thought process, and that's an annual event. So this year we went on Sunday, and of course Alexis got an ornament too because she's an
oh yeah,
honorary
she's
family member. So there's Hallmark has an ornament. The most American thing we could find was I think it was an electric guitar with an American flag on it, and that's Alexis's ornament this year. That's from the
yeah. I
Francis
think
Army.
we give our kids an ornament and every year. That's the early Christmas opened gift. We've got a ton of those.
Yep.
3
Yep.
trees are up, as well as the bonus paddle tree is back up.
We have
The
2
little
trees. We have the sports
paddle
tree
tree.
downstairs. It was covering Tennessee stuff and football players. So that's not up yet, but it will go up this week. So,
Yep.
all right, let's get to the work.
We have
Enough
sufficiently
Christmas
distracted
talk.
ourselves.
Well,
Preachers
yeah,
with undiagnosed ADD. That's probably us.
squirrel. By the way, I do have World Cup on over here. So if I every once in a while just get kind of like, what is going on? This is a carryover from Alexis being at my house for a week. It's
Yeah.
World Cup all the time. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I think I read somewhere that they once blew a 13 colony lead. That team from England. I don't
Dude,
know. That
there
was the
was a
best.
lot of mourning when the U.S. tied England, and she had brought a flag to run around the house, and that thing stayed up. It was great. Anyway,
Good times.
we need to get to the work. So, Phil, let's go ahead and say from the outset that today, then 2 more shows.
That's the plan. This show, next show, and then in theory,
Series finale coming up
series
December
slash
13th.
all the other things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it won't reappear in other formats and other things, but we feel like this is probably for the best for a couple of factors.
We're done with the work.
Mainly schedule. Like there's works that we've got to do, and
Yeah.
so today we wanted to talk about the work itself, kind of a little bit of a summary, mostly in the realm of encouragement. I think as a concept, most folks would probably understand that there are some individuals who are in preaching who don't really know kind of that before they get there, like that it's actual work. They have an idea about the work of preaching, but they didn't really understand what the work was like until 5, 6 years after starting to preach in some capacity. And I think it's important to recognize, and this is specifically for those who are involved in preaching. While there are preacher adjacent individuals, family, brethren, etc., I want you to know that when you're doing that work, number one, you're not alone. Number two, there are people who understand both the academic difficulty, but also the emotional difficulty. There's a physical side to preaching as well. But those first two, the learning and returning that knowledge to others, and the emotional weight that goes with it, is a heavy load. And I want you guys to know that it's going to be okay. Like even when you can't bear it, it's going to be okay. There are
Yeah.
time periods in my preaching experience where the weight was so heavy, um, it produced within me the equivalent of depression. You know, um, kids will often joke and say, "Man, I wish I was grown up because if I was grown up, then I could stay in bed all the time. No one would tell me to get up, eat junk food, and not have to go do anything." Like that's basically depression. Um, well, that's basically some periods of preaching, where that's all you want to do.
It's basically depression. It's a bag of Oreos, a 2 liter of Mountain Dew, and Netflix. That's what depression
That's
is.
basically depression.
Yeah.
It's maybe
Yeah.
not clinical depression, but it's a level of despondency that should not be
Yeah.
binged on for too long.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
look, there's some times where it's just you need someone to scrape you off the floor and say it's time to step outside again.
Well,
Your brethren
listen,
are there for you.
I think the thing that's really important, and one of the reasons we wanted to get into this, man, it's been almost 4 years. What, 3.5 years, I guess, technically,
Yeah,
close to 4. Has it been 4 yet? Maybe in 4.
about 4.
Um, uh, the work is hard. Like that's the part that really motivated this. And I think you and I reconnected because the work was hard where we were at. We reconnected through some difficulty. And this kind of was born out of that difficulty. And how do we try to help guys prepare for the difficulty of the work? And at the same time, we've been honest about this, that not everybody who watches this is a preacher. Part of this was to allow just the person in the pew maybe to pull back the curtain and to see into what the work's really about. It is work. There's a lot of work to this. And it's one of those things where I kind of liken it to football. You don't, a professional football player works all week behind the scenes to play for 3 hours, and that's all. We judge them based off of that 3 hour block of what they
Yeah.
do completely. But it's taken them all week, film, all those kind of things. And what we do a lot of times is 3 or 4 hours of public kind of viewing, but it takes us all week to do that. And that's why there is an office, by the way. Whether it's at home, and I think one of the funny things, like even if you work from home, you have an office at home, you have an office in the building because there's work to be done. And so, like you said, because it's work and because it's people and because of all those things, not only is it work, but sometimes it's work that's painful and hurts, and you feel depressed and beat up, and all of those things. It's kind of like a family business. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, let me make the next step there. We kind of focus on the preacher there. It's also work unintentionally drawing in the whole family. Um, Even in contexts where the evangelist, the preacher, the minister puts a lot of gates to make sure that it doesn't bleed into their family's lives. When I see from a distance any two children of ministers interact, they instantly have a secret code that they share from experiences that others have imputed onto them. Like, it's to a lesser degree the kids of elders. That usually doesn't happen until they're more grown, and so they don't really experience it the same way. But any preacher kid that interacts with any of my kids, and vice versa, I think probably also the same thing for your
And
kids.
that's a connection for our two daughters, no doubt, is they're having the PK connection.
Well,
They
a
have a
double
lot of
dose
other
of
things.
sorrow.
Yeah,
Not
they
only
have a
that,
lot of
but
other
because we're
they got a
connected.
lot of other things that brings them together, but that is something that because it's funny too, because you'll hear this stuff. You hear stuff from probably Hallie, but I'll hear from Jill about you. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
funny, like especially your social media, which she thinks is funny. But anyway, like
No,
this
like,
immediate.
and Hallie does not think my social media is funny
Yeah,
at all.
Julie doesn't think mine is either, but Hallie probably likes mine. That's weird. But there is an immediate connection. And I'm one of those guys that has gone to painful limits, and I think you have too, to try to put up a lot of gates and fences and boundaries and hedges to protect my kids and to protect my wife, and especially to protect my wife because of some things that happened early on. And you can do all of that, and you can help members understand, that she's not being paid and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're still going to absorb some of the stuff that comes
Yeah.
along with this, regardless of how you do. So all of that's part of that, to say, like you opened up, sometimes guys get into this and they don't realize, or maybe they have this kind of image that it's going to be a certain way. I mean, one of the things we try to be very honest about is you're going to get hurt doing this. I mean, go back and read through the Old Testament and the prophets. I think about Jeremiah and other prophets, Ezekiel, and how, I mean, we're not to the level of them, Phil, but one of the things you see is that messengers of God often feel rejected. They feel unwanted. They have grief. Why would that be any different for us today? Just because we're in a different time period. So there's a lot of similarities to that.
Yeah, I don't think there's actually that much of a difference on the internalization side from the prophet to the preacher. Our personal experiences might vary quite a bit. No one's tried to kill me lately. And so there's that,
Right.
because of what I'm preaching. So there's that side, but the emotional side of it is all living in the same realm. And all the same questions of spiritual support exist inside the heart of the preacher. When I preach, is this what God wanted me to be preaching? And it kind of touches on part of the reality I think is super important. Amongst the churches that you and I are connected to, it is atypical, pretty like really normal for most of the preachers to kind of have a communal connection to those same churches, in that they're a lot the same. If the congregation is full in an area with folks with advanced education, then the preacher tends to end up somebody having advanced education. So there's a sense of sameness that exists there. And if it's a more rural community, the guy ends up preaching there tends to be someone who has that particular background. It's rarely separate from those two things. Well, what that then does is create the veneer that then everything else is the same, inside and outside, when in reality, that's probably not the case, because in some congregations, particularly those without shepherds, it often is the preacher who is doing the work of mentoring and encouraging and rebuking and strengthening and pouring themselves out to a higher degree than any other single individual. And so that part of the work, that emotional drain that takes place, is hard to put into a piece of paper or a box or a bottle and say, here, drink this in advance so you know what you're going to taste 2 years down the road. Like it just, there's no way I could frame that in good sentences to someone who says, well, I want to start preaching. Well, let me take a stick for a while and beat on you for a little bit. And like, do you like that? Okay.
You mentioned earlier too, this is an interesting thing I think people don't understand, is there's a physical exhaustion to preaching. Now, I will admit that since I don't work at a congregation with an evening service, this is easier than it used to be. But I remember back in my day, when I was preaching, all day long on Sunday, 2 assemblies, that's 3 hours when you add in a class. And usually, regardless of whether I had elders or not, there was some kind of a meeting almost every week. And you've been in that, Phil. You've been in that space where you get up. Of course, the other thing, not everybody knows this, but I always wake up by 5 o'clock on Sunday morning, sometimes earlier. That's my time to get up. It gets me awake. The first hour, I probably just drink coffee and read, and then I start going over things and prepping and being ready. And so there were nights that I'm getting home when we had business meetings after church and we had stuff in between. There were nights I'm getting up at 5. I'm not getting home till 9 or 10 o'clock. And it's been all day long, constant, something along those ways. Monday morning comes and you're just like, I'm done. Like and here's the other side of that, and you know this, guys like Mark Russell know this. If you're really pouring your passion and emotion into a sermon when you're preaching it, it becomes a physical activity, and it has some physical burning, calorie kind of thing going on. Like, wear your Apple Watch. It's always funny. Like, when I would wear my Apple Watch, sometimes if you're not careful, you'll slip into the calorie burning zone. It will think you're doing a workout while you're preaching, which is really funny. But like, when you do it right, it's there. And so I think it's interesting. There's a physical tired, not just an emotional tired.
Well, yeah, there's a whole period of time where at the East Side, we were doing Bible class, sermon, Bible class, and a lot of Sundays that was me. Not every Sunday. We tried to rotate around one of those two classes. Then I would drive across Atlanta to Lilburn and preach there in the evenings. Sometimes have a meeting in the middle. Other Sundays we often have leadership meetings or other activities for a local church, stuff that's ongoing, in addition to all the background preparation that takes place to make all of those things happen. Those are part of the physicality of preaching that isn't something that everyone responds to well. Early on, it's easy to keep a healthy schedule for some of that stuff before your children are born. But the last couple of guys that I mentored directly who are preaching full time now, one of the things I said, look, when you're planning, you need a plan for a gym membership. Like, you actually need to financially plan for that and socially plan for that, because, and that could be at home. Like, your membership to the gym could be a place to work out in your garage, because it will actually improve your quality of life and it'll improve the longevity of your preaching. And I say that in very specific terms because one of our friends, David Dan, who probably is
way healthier than
me, at least
way healthier than me,
in the top tier of healthy eaters, guys who work out all the time, like, just recently had a whole heart procedure done in because he had blockage, 90% blockage in one of his little vessels going into his heart. Our perspective, David and I were talking, was, man, all of his extra health stuff probably gave him the extra time he needed to get that diagnosed. Because if he hadn't taken care of it, then it would have been worse. Genetics play a big part into that too. Like, it's not just, hey, he's a preacher. Like, no, that dude is straight up fit. So my admonition side to those who are involved in the work of preaching, hey, look, no, it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's going to be emotional work. It's going to be physical work. And do not deceive yourself into thinking that you don't benefit from the academic work side, because it is academic work. You can go too far into that pool, but you need to swim in there in order to do the laps you need to do so that your preaching improves not only in delivery, but in legitimate content. If there is one area that I think that, this is my preference coming in, that preachers in the United States suffer from amongst churches of Christ, is being roundly misinformed or uninformed about the benefit of quality reading material that exists in such large quantities. Like, it's to a point where it worries me about local churches that I wish I could do more. I'm doing the best that I can to help others, but that's an area that I'm just seriously concerned about. And it will make your preaching better.
I remember from a book, I think it was Hendricks wrote, Teaching to Change Lives, something similar to that, maybe 7 Habits to Change Lives. He tells a story about walking by his professor's house. He's in seminary, and it's late at night, and the light's still on, and he can see his professor studying. And this professor is much older, respected. And he eventually one time goes over to eat there, and he talks about how he told the professor how he sees him, and he walks by him, and he says, you're teaching us, you're well established, you're respected. Why are you studying so much? And he said, I would rather have my students drink from rushing water than a stagnant pool.
Yeah.
Was the way and I can tell you that looking back, there's times that I thought I was delivering rushing water than it was really a stagnant pool. Um, and I think that's one of the things that I'm I'm not big shock here. I'm not known for my academic prowess, but I still read. And I think one of the things that we've done a good job of here that's kind of got me back into the habit of even trying to point to people on how to find good resources through things like Logos, and how to do that, how to manage that in a way that you get good resources for a decent price.
Hmm.
And because that's really important to help people understand, honestly, the need to get, and I mean, don't read the same old guys that have been the Brotherhood manuals for years, I think is the way I'll say it. You know, branch out a little bit. And I don't go down the path that Phil does with all the journals and everything, but
That's a little too
uh,
deep. That's the deep
it's
end
a
that I
little
don't
too.
recommend everyone go
That's
into.
yeah. That's not rushing water. That's kind of like a monsoon. Uh, but if you're not reading guys like Wright and Witherington and Carson and De Silva and some of those guys that have a little bit better view than some of the stuff that we've been passing around for like years, and I'm thinking things like McQuiggan and Hendrickson, those kind of things. And I'm not saying those things are bad. There's still value there, but there's value to adding to them.
And let me give it like a quick little word about that. I love Restoration era and Great Awakening era, which are the two packages of time frame that kind of overlap for religious writing in the Americas. And I love them because they are easily contextualized in that you can read it and remind yourself about the history of those communities, and then you can see how they interacted with the Bible in their own way. And so you shouldn't throw them away. You develop the skill to pull the meat off those bones and say, man, that was really good. Like now I really get why the Cane Ridge context makes so much sense when I better understand and appreciate Presbyterianism and the Scottish Presbyterian influence into Cane Ridge. Like it was all about, not all about, but it was a lot about a communion service that just got super popular all of a sudden and then birthed a great interest in spiritual things in those communities. That is a great benefit from reading some of those early restoration writers and thinkers of that era, just as much as Kaufman, some of the ACU series, some of the other more narrow restoration writing space will tell you about their context. Their material is good. And I can guarantee you, if they had access to the type of research that took place post Dead Sea Scroll arrival, their research would even be better. Those writings would have improved. It's not the only thing that makes a lot of the Old Testament and New Testament cultural significant interactions better than what they had access to, but that's a big chunk of it. And knowing about that can radically enrich your message, especially if you can learn to take just a little bit of it and the right little bit and place it into a message that will make it have that much more influence. You don't have to give the rushing water back to everybody. You need to dig and find the pearl and bring it up the top to those who are not willing or don't need to get into the weeds as much.
Yep.
And so I think those things are important things for all preachers to kind of reinvigorate within themselves. I want to add this tidbit to the work of preaching on this side. One of the benefits of the last 3 years has been, and particularly ramped up a lot during, like February to September of 2020, was that this allowed Terry and I to really connect with a number of people that we probably never would have met otherwise who preach. Which is why I have my little moniker today, Phil Comatol, because uniformly, when someone meets me the first time in person, they're like, I had no idea that you were this
Because you're
tall.
sitting down.
I'm like clearly not posting on social media enough about giant content. Like I need to start doing some bit about being a giant.
Well, the problem is though that your kids are kind of giants for kids. So like in the context of family photos, with the exception of Jill, you look kind of proportional. It's just kind
Yeah,
of
like
Yeah.
No, James
And Jill doesn't
is
get on Jill's pictures. Don't find their way to social media very often.
minimal footprint.
Yeah. Yes. Minimal.
There are rules
Yeah.
about these things
These
that have
are
to be
rules about
followed.
these things. Yes.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
so, like, just a general encouragement for those who preach. And look, we're obviously not tonight today. We'll probably do a little bit more next week when we talk about the relational sides. Um, this is not a information dense episode where we try to point you to read things. We also want to include one other thing. I want to thank everybody who's reached out to us over this process. Hopefully, if we can convince Mark and Shane and a few others who have been more regular contributors
Do
to
we,
our
do we like
endeavors,
Crozier in? That's the question.
Crozier
Does
has to be
Crozier,
invited just so that I can make fun of him.
does Crozier
Um,
come? That's the question, because I think he'll turn us
well, we'll
down.
send out the message and try to get everyone. We'd like them
Yeah.
to come. We really appreciated all your participation, and especially, and this is something that's maybe unique to me. Like, I appreciate critique, um, because it's really the only thing that will actually improve your ability in the long run. And I especially appreciate critique that is specific and compassionate. And to a certain degree, I'll even include Edwin in that category, although I don't want to get him too excited.
He'll argue about what you mean by unique.
Yeah, I know. I know. He knows too. I think he's self-aware enough to know that afterwards.
Now, by unique, do you mean?
Yeah, I mean you, Edwin. I mean exactly you. No.
Obviously, he's not here, or we would already have some reaction to all of that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts for today, Terry?
No, just, we're being reflective a little bit and really generic, but I will say this. I don't want to make it sound like the work's terrible. This is a blessing to my life. I know it's a blessing to your life, Phil. I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. I've thought about that at times. I think you've thought about that at times. We keep coming back to the same thing. And there's a reason for that. It's rewarding. And I probably next week's topic will figure into that more, but it's extremely rewarding. It's something that we enjoy doing. And I'd just like to encourage young men, especially, to consider taking on this work. The church, the kingdom needs good, solid young men to do the work of sharing the gospel. So we'd encourage you to think about that.
Oh yeah, it's Giving Tuesday. I just remember that. And so, is it right here? You can choose to give to this institution in one of two ways. You can go give to them directly, and
or you can give to them through tuition.
You can give to them, and I'll put a little note that you can send money right to the business office.
If you would like to give, you can put
split two-way.
Jillian Francis as part of the giving.
You can split it to Francis children, Martin children, and just divide it into the accounts.
Yeah. If you'd like to give in their name,
we
would not turn that down.
I was like 2 inches away from creating a GoFundMe today for doing that, like a little GoFundMe link specifically to aid in the education of our children.
Give to Jillian's tuition.
Or at least send them a snack bar,
Yeah.
Little Snickers bar. I think maybe an organic treat from Trader Joe's. They probably all accept.
The hardest problem with my kid is she won't eat a Snickers bar. I don't even know what the kid will eat anymore because she's so picky and health and things. So
I can send you probably a list. Let me check with Hallie. I think she probably would know.
Obviously adopted.
Yeah.
Anything Kodiak. I know that. We're good with anything Kodiak.
Yeah.
Protein.
We can arrange that. We know some people.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you all for enduring or enjoying. You pick your options. Each of these broadcasts. There's 2 more on the docket, although the final one might start a little bit late. We're not quite exactly sure. But you guys have a great week, and may the Lord bless you in all your